Named after the state of Iowa, the U.S.S. Iowa would be ordered on July 1, 1939. She would be built by the New York Naval Yard. Her keel would be laid down on June 27, 1940. She would be launched on August 27, 1942, and launched at the New York Naval Yard, sponsored by Mrs. Henry A. Wallace, who was the wife of the Vice President. The ship was first commissioned on February 22, 1943. She would displace 45,000 tons. The U.S.S. Iowa would be 887 feet 3 inches long. Her beam would be 108 feet 2 inches. Her draft would be 37 feet 2 inches. The ship would have a top speed of 33 knots. Her crew would consist of 151 officers and 2,637 enlisted men. Her first commanding officer would be Captain John L. McRae. On February 24th, she would leave on her shakedown cruise in Chesapeake Bay along the Atlantic coast. She would have impressive results, and the USS Iowa would receive her post-shakedown overhaul on July 9, 1943. Her armament would be as equally impressive. Her belt would consist of armor plates of just over 12 inches in some spots that would taper down to just over 1.5 inches. This included a 19-degree incline. The ship's bulkheads were transverse for the aft plates of over 11 inches. Her barbettes and upper armor segments a beam of 17.3 inches, quarters at 14.8 inches, and a center line of 11.6 inches. USS Iowa's turret faceplate 17 inches. Armor over 2.5 inches of specially treated steel, or STS. The side armor is 9.5 inches. Back armor of 12 inches, and the top armor would be 7.25 inches. It would also be an all-over 0.75 inch of STS, or special treated steel plating. The armor on her main decks or bomb deck would be 1.5 inches. Over the second deck or protective deck would be 6 inches. When launched, her armament would be 9 16-inch or 406 mm 50 caliber Mark 7 guns, 25-inch 127 mm 38 caliber Mark 12 guns, 76 40 mm 56 caliber anti-aircraft guns, and 52 20 mm 70 caliber anti-aircraft cannons. She would also have 3 Voight Kingfisher OS-2U float planes. On August 27, 1943, she would head to the North Atlantic to Newfoundland for her first war patrol. The assignment was called the Tirpitz Watch. The Tirpitz was the sister ship to the German battleship Bismarck. The USS Iowa would contribute to the neutralization of the threat presented by the Tirpitz. Then she would poised in Norwegian waters. Later on October 25th, she would be docked in the Norfolk Navy Yard in preparation to carry President Roosevelt to North Africa for the Tehran Conference. The conference was on November 12, 1943. Among those in attendance were President Roosevelt and other high-ranking members of American delegations to Mers el-Kabir, Algeria, and then Tehran. The Tehran Conference was with Joseph Stalin and Winston Churchill. Once the conference was over on December 16th, the USS Iowa would return the President to the United States. One interesting side note would be the bathtub that would be installed for President Roosevelt, perhaps the only bathtub installed for a president in the history on American warships. The tub was installed as a convenience for President Franklin D. Roosevelt when he crossed the Atlantic Ocean to meet with the British Prime Minister Winston Churchill and Soviet Secretary General Joseph Stalin at Casablanca, Morocco, on the first leg of the journey to the Tehran Conference in November 1943. On January 2, 1944, the USS Iowa would journey to the Pacific Ocean as the flagship of Battleship Division 7, in company with the U.S.S. New Jersey. The USS Iowa became a charter member of the famous Pacific Fleet Task Force No. 58. And on January 7th, 1944, she would make her first pass through the Panama Canal. On January 23rd of 1944, the ship's first Pacific campaign would be in support of carrier airstrikes against Kwajalein and Inuitak atolls. The U.S.S. Iowa's first firing of her weapons in a combat situation would come on February 16th in an attack on the Japanese naval base at Truk in the Caroline Islands. In action off Truk, the U.S.S. Iowa would sink the light cruiser Katori. The Iowa's first shoreline bombardment would come on March 18, 1944, against Mille Atoll in the Marshall Islands. She would receive her first hit, and she would be struck by two Japanese projectiles, one of 5 inches and one of 6 inches. The 6-inch projectile would hit turret 2, and the 5-inch projectile would hit the hull plating, neither of which caused significant damage. Then on March 30th, in support of Task Group 58, the U.S.S. Iowa would participate in airstrikes against Palau and Woolley Islands, followed by further strikes against Hollandai, Atape, and the Wake Islands. On April 22nd, she would support the landing of the Army soldiers landing at Atape, Tanahumara, and Humboldt Bays. Later, the ship would participate in the May 1st bombardment of the airfield, Bombs Wharf, and other enemy facilities at Pond Nape. On June 13th, the Iowa would shell Sispain and Tinian and would destroy an ammunition dump. Then on June 19th, she would participate in the Battle of the Philippine Sea, during which the Iowa would destroy 3 Japanese attack planes. On August 1st, Captain Alan R. McCann would assume command of the U.S.S. Iowa from August through November. In 1941 through 1944, Captain McCann led 2 submarine squadrons, served in important positions at the Navy Department, and was commanding officer of the battleship Iowa BB-61 from August through November of 1944. After promotion to the rank of Rear Admiral, he was Chief of Staff to Commander. 10th Fleet served with the Atlantic Fleet and commanded Task Force 68, which escorted President Harry S. Truman to and from Potsdam Conference. Captain McCann would be replaced by Captain James Lemuel Holloway, Jr., who assumed command of the Iowa BB-61, the flagship of Battleship Division 7, in November of 1944. On November 25th, the Iowa would survive a kamikaze attack. The kamikaze attack would be on the 3rd Fleet, during which the USS Iowa claimed 2 Jills and a Judy. In December, she would weather a typhoon. She would sustain damage to her shaft, which would require her to return to the United States for repair and refitting out. She would also lose one of her seaplanes. There would be 24 ships damaged by the typhoon, plus the destroyers U.S.S. Monogram Hull and Spence. They were sunk with a loss of 765 sailors. The U.S.S. Iowa would be in dry dock until March 19th of 1945, and this would be the first major overhaul since leaving the East Coast. The bridge area would be enclosed, new search and fire control radar would be installed, and on April 15th, the Iowa would reach Okinawa in order to relieve the U.S.S. New Jersey. On July 1st, Captain Holloway would be replaced by Captain Charles Welburn, Jr., who would assume command of the ship. Later on, August 27th, along with the USS Missouri, USS Iowa were put into Sagamai Bay to effect the surrender of the Yokoshima Naval District. On August 29th, USS Iowa and USS Missouri entered Tokyo Bay in support of landing of occupation forces that would take place the next day. And on August 30th, the USS Iowa would secure the Japanese battleship Nagato. Sailors from the USS Iowa Underwater Demolition Team 18 and the high-speed transport USS Horace A. Brass would secure the Japanese battleship Nagato. Captain Thomas J. Flynn, executive officer of the Iowa, would assume command. On October 1946, the USS Iowa again overhauled. This time was at Puget Sound Navy Yard. She received SK-2 radar and had many 20mm and 40mm mounts removed. Then was painted haze gray on all vertical surfaces. Later, on March 24, 1949, the U.S.S. Iowa would be decommissioned. On August 25, 1951, the U.S.S. Iowa would be recommissioned for service due to the escalating tension occurring between the United States and Korea. On August 1, 1951, her new captain would be William R. Smedberg III. The Iowa would head to Japan to relieve the U.S.S. Wisconsin and become the flagship of the Vice Admiral Robert T. Briscoe, commander of the 7th Fleet, operating in support of the United States forces in Korea. On April 13th, in support of the IROK Corps, the USS Iowa would kill 100 enemy troops, destroy 6 gun replacements, and seriously damage enemy division headquarters. Later on May 25th, in action against North Korea, the Industrial and Rail Transportation Center at Kanjin. Not since the USS Missouri bombarded Kanjin in November of 1950 had a battleship operated that far north. Just 48 miles from the Russian border, the USS Iowa effectively destroyed Kanjin's industrial center. Then in June, she would participate in gun strikes against Maidango-do, Tashan, Kanjing, Chodo, Sokto, and ports of Hungnam and Wosnan. After several more bombardment missions, now under the command of Captain John W. Ailes III, on December 1st, the USS Iowa would be regunned, and later, on February 24th of 1958, the USS Iowa would be decommissioned again at the Philadelphia Naval Yard. On September 1st, 1982, the USS Iowa would be towed to New Orleans, to Avondale Shipyard, for modernization and reactivation. She would then be towed to Ingalls Shipbuilding, Pascagoula, Mississippi, for completion. On April 1st, 1984, her new captain would be Gerald E. Grecknow. On April 28, 1984, the Iowa would be recommissioned, and she would depart on April 30th and head to the Autech Range for Naval Gunfire Support, or NGFS, training. On May 21st, off Vegas Island in Puerto Rico, NGFS qualifications were completed for her 16-inch guns and 5-inch guns. Later, on July 1st, she would participate in gunnery exercises off the Vieques Island. Later, on November 1st, the Iowa would participate in Computex 185 in Puerto Rico, the operations area from November 1st through the 20th. Then later on February 1st, the ship would be deployed to Central America. She completed several civic action and humanitarian projects in Costa Rica and Honduras. She then participated in encounter exercises with the Battleship Surface Action Group. Later on in April, after more battle force integrated training, the USS Iowa would be placed in dry dock in Norfolk Navy Yard, Portsmouth, Virginia. On July 31st, she would be taken out of dry dock to load gun ammunition while at Whiskey Island Anchorage and Hampton Roads. This was followed by a demonstration of a Tomahawk handling system, and then 10 days at sea trials and ammunition unload at Yorktown. Then on August 27th, she went underway for Ocean Safari as part of the Battleship Surface Action Group, providing protection for the convoy of supply ships en route from Boston to Northern Europe. Then on September 20th, with Operation Ocean Safari having been completed, following the rendezvous with the USS America Battle Group, USS Iowa went on through the English Channel to Le Havre, France, then Copenhagen and Aarhus, Denmark, and Oslo, Norway. October seen her head for the Baltic Operations, BALTOPS, in 85 in the Baltic Sea, as part of the U.S. Task Unit conducting multilateral exercises with Allied vessels in the Baltic area. Then on July 1st, Captain Sequest would become her commanding officer, and later, on July 4th of 1986, the USS Iowa carried President Ronald Reagan for Liberty Weekend's International Naval Review in the Hudson River. Later on December 14th, the ship would reach a milestone as she fired her 1,000th round of 16-inch ammunition since being recommissioned in 1984. She would be refit and her weapons upgraded. This would include the addition of 12 5-inch 127mm 38 caliber Mark 12 guns, 32 BGM-109 Tomahawk cruise missiles, 16 RGM-84 Harpoon anti-ship missiles, and 4 20mm 76 caliber Phalanx WIWS defense systems. However, tragedy would strike the ship and her crew later on April 19th of 1989. An explosion within Turret 2 would kill 47 crewmen off the coast of Puerto Rico. It would be on November 26th on their way to Norfolk that a 16-inch round would be fired, giving the U.S.S. Iowa a total of 2,873 rounds fired since her 1984 recommissioning. And since U.S.S. Iowa's initial commissioning date in 1943, a total of 11,834 16-inch rounds had been fired. On April 19, 1990, a Turret 2 memorial service would be held. Memorial plaque would also be dedicated in honor of those who lost their lives a year earlier. Then on October 26th, under the command of Captain John P. Morse, the U.S.S. Iowa would be decommissioned for the final time. Her service of 50 years would be celebrated and the ship would be honored. After several repairs and fresh paint, she now sits in Los Angeles Harbor. This amazing battleship has so much history, and I was really only able to scratch the surface with all of it. I will put a link to the main website in the description. She has 50 years of service to honor and to explore. I hope I was able to give the U.S.S. Iowa BB-61 the honor she deserves. The battleship U.S.S. Iowa Museum is located at 250 S Harbor Boulevard, Los Angeles, San Pedro, California, 90731, and she is now open for visitors.